Welcome to the Gold Newsletter Podcast, your bank of knowledge of investments, economics, and geopolitics. Go to goldnewsletter.com for our publications and archives to increase your wealth monetarily and educationally.
This is the Gold Newsletter Podcast. Fergus Hodgson, your host. So pleased to be with you and excited about doing today's show. We have an excellent guest, David Sewell, or how do I pronounce your last name?
Sewell.
Sewell, great.
Like the old mayor of Toronto used to be called. His name was Sewell.
Excellent. And David is the CEO of, I'm not sure whether you pronounce this in the Spanish way, but Agronosotros or Agronosotros. I don't know. What's the regular way of pronouncing that one?
Both ways. You got it right in English and Spanish.
Okay. So CEO of Agronosotros or Nosotros, and that is a holding company that facilitates investment in coffee in Panama, or coffee production, and cacao production in Belize. And this organization has 90 employees, and I've been reading about it. It's particularly targeted towards smaller investors who want to get a piece of this agricultural investment pie. And we've actually discussed this before on the show, so David, I'm super pleased to have you. Welcome to the Gold Newsletter.
Thank you, Fergus. My pleasure to be here.
Are you actually in Boquete, Panama?
I am sitting in Boquete, Panama as we speak.
I looked at that on the map. It's actually probably closer to San Jose than to Panama City.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're on the western side of Panama, maybe 20 kilometers from the Costa Rican border and 500 kilometers away from Panama City. It's
just you've got such a fascinating story, and that intrigues me as much as the investment prospect, because we discussed before that you were born in Winnipeg, Manitoba. You went to the University of Saskatchewan, and for the listeners who are not so familiar with Canada, those are both prairie provinces or Western Canada, and just interesting places. I mean, although I say that interesting to me, but many people would say they're a grassland, so flat and not necessary, and they have terrible weather. So
those of us who've left describe it as a great place to be from.
Years ago, I drove across Canada, and I hate to say we didn't really stop much in Manitoba or Saskatchewan. We just kept on going to Alberta. But so he has an MBA from Queen's, which is in Ontario, and a BS from University of Saskatchewan, and also studied with the Canadian Securities Institute, which I've also had some interest in, given it I don't know how to describe it. I guess it's a private organization that trains people in the Canadian financial markets specifically. Do you do you still keep in touch with the Canadian Securities Institute?
No, they are more or less the licensing body for a person that wants to be a stockbroker, or as they call them in Canada, a registered representative. So you got to go through them to get your license. Yeah,
you got to jump through those hoops. But if you want to work in the financial industry actually within Canada, then that's probably what you likely have to do.
Correct.
So his bio, he's got 3 children, 7 grandchildren. Has that number inflated since the bio was written?
No, there's still the same 3 kids, and that'll never change. But the 7 grandchildren is now 9, I think.
Oh, that's great. Congratulations. Okay, so been in Panama since 2007. And is all that time in Boquete?
No. We first started in Panama City. We lived in Panama City, I think, maybe 5 years in total. Moved to a couple or two or three different neighborhoods in Panama City just to get to know where we liked and where we didn't like. And then we left Panama City and went off to the beach and lived in a couple of beach communities, an hour and a half away from Panama City. Returned to Panama City for a while and did a little consulting work. I was retired from the private equity business, but kept my finger in doing a few things. Living on the beach is kind of boring. Jimmy Buffett lies. There's not enough booze to put in the blender to keep you interested in what's going on. All that happens is the tide goes in, the tide goes out, and the tide goes in, and the tide goes out. So we got tired of that fairly quickly. Moved farther west and inland into a little town named after me called David, Panama.
Yes.
And it's the second largest city in Panama, but it's only 160,000 people. Went there, tried it out as a place to live, and started our coffee business by being there, and then subsequently moved to Boquete about 3.5 years ago.
Okay. Well, I actually was just in Panama a couple of weeks ago, and one thing to note about Panama, or at least Panama City, that's where I went, and then to the canal, is that it's much more developed than the rest of Central America. I mean, I live in Guatemala, or Guatemala City, and the contrast is stark. So I guess maybe it's the American or just the foreign involvement in the Panama Canal and that region has really facilitated a much bigger and, at least on the surface, more impressive place. I don't know it so well.
It's amazing. I mean, you can look around, and we first moved in 2006 and 7. We stood on the balcony of our apartment or on the rooftop terrace, and we could see 40 cranes that are building high-rise buildings at one time, just from our building. All at one time. We said, wow, this place is really booming, and it has been doing that for years. Those days, before the financial crisis, the GDP was 10, 11% annually. And just booming. And even after the crisis, it dropped to a low of around 3.5. And unfortunately, the U.S. has never even recovered to 3, never mind 3.5 as the low. And Panama's operating at 6 or 7% GDP, annual GDP growth now. And it's a thriving middle class, hundreds and hundreds of skyscraper buildings, huge buildings. The American influence is very important. The physical location is significant. The canal, of course, but just being where Panama City is with respect to being able to travel easily, virtually all the way west or all the way east around the world. The Tocumen Airport can handle 15 million people a year now. Every major airline has regular, if not daily, flights into it. And a lot of that happened because the U.S. got all wiggy about their visas and things like that and made life so difficult for people from Central and South America and Europe and the rest of the world to come into the U.S. Just passing through to go on a flight, you now need a visa. And that really killed the business over there and really improved the business in Panama. So the airport has doubled and tripled since we've been here. That's one of the reasons behind it. Panama City has international banking, 80 or 100 different headquarters for international banks. They have international insurance companies. They're all paying fees annually to the government, so the cash flow is huge. The maritime industry, probably 80% of the ships in the world are flagged Panamanian. The canal produces a couple $2 billion a year in revenue for the country, so it's a happening concern.
It is, and in some ways it's ironic, of course, the fact that Panama's success means that it doesn't get so much of the news. That we all hear about Nicaragua. There's some crazy crackdown going on there from the regime of Ortega, and then obviously Venezuelans are fleeing as well. So a lot of people do go to Panama. So it's a very international place, extremely so. And yeah, you mentioned it's a great a hub for flights, of course, and then banking, because I'm not. This may be changing in recent times. I haven't followed it so closely, but there are maybe more liberal or open banking regulations in Panama, and also foreign incorporation. So if you want to incorporate in Panama, there's actually you pay the fees for registration each year, but I don't think there's a corporate tax so long as you are not actually conducting business in Panama. So there's a lot to look at in terms of the location. And you said I'm trying to think from your bio, you'd gone through Argentina. Was it Mexico as well? What other countries did you test out first?
Yeah, I spent quite a bit of time in Mexico when I left Canada for two reasons. I was looking for warmer weather and lower taxes. And I found both of them, ironically, in Southern California the first time.
Wow.
Marginal tax rates in Canada when I left in 89 were huge. And I remember paying 22% interest on my mortgage back in Canada in the late 80s. Numbers were out of whack. I went to Southern California, tax rate was way lower. Weather was a lot better. And over the last 15, 20 years, the franchise tax board in California has turned it into a communist country. But that's not a great place to live now. But
yeah, super expensive to live in California.
Super expensive and super regulated. So, but it wasn't so bad in the late 80s and early 90s. So went there, and I owned a home on the Baja California side of Mexico as a vacation weekend place to get away.
Yes.
to go there. I kept that for quite a lot of time. Spent some time thinking about real estate development in Mexico, but decided that there's no rule of law there, and the more successful you are, the more likely they are to take it from you, etc. So I didn't do anything there. Wandered around. Went to Costa Rica for 4 or 5 years and did a small real estate development down there. Costa Rica was okay. The infrastructure wasn't very good because they will not privatize anything, and it's all run by the government. So you know how well that works. Right. And they haven't improved that since. So they've gone downhill a lot in their competitiveness.
For more than 40 years, top financial experts and private investors from all over the world have gathered for the New Orleans Investment Conference to discover new opportunities and strategies, exchange ideas, and plan for the coming year. To learn more about today's investing environment and updates, join Mark Skousen, Peter Schiff, Brian London, Robert Kiyosaki, Doug Casey, and dozens of other experts at this year's event from the 1st to the 4th of November. Go to NewOrleansConference.com to register today.
A comment on Costa Rica. Many people will know that right now Costa Rica is having a major national kind of strike or confrontation over tax reforms because it has a terrible fiscal situation for the nation, and any kind of cutbacks, both the unions or sindicalistas, we would say in Spanish, are just fighting it tooth and nail. So that's a real barrier to progress in that country. Otherwise, Costa Rica, as you said, it has a lot going for it.
It's beautiful. I mean, if you're retired, it's probably the most beautiful country in Central America. I mean, it is absolutely fantastic on an environmental basis. But if you try to do business from there, they're still mired in the 70s. And nothing really works very well. Banking system's not very reliable, and et cetera, et cetera. So I tried it out, lived there, enjoyed it, wandered off to Argentina for a year. I went down for 3 or 4 week vacation and came back a year and a half later. But
don't we all?
Myself.
Yeah. Okay.
Won't go any deeper into that.
Which part of the country were you in?
Mainly Buenos Aires.
Okay, sure.
But did a lot of traveling over to Chile and other places, and in Uruguay and things like that over that period of time. So I got to know that. But you being an aficionado of Canada and me having grown up there in 40 below weather, I realized that I overcorrected latitude wise, and they get snow down there, and I don't like snow anymore. So I moved back north and landed in Florida for a 3-month period to help out a buddy that had a .com company after the .com bust, and he was doing very, very well, and he needed some help for 3 months, and I ended up staying with him for 3 years, and then finally Deb and I decided that was time enough to be done there, and that's when we came to Panama.
Just one final note on Canada, since I followed this actually closely, because I'm always looking for a place just like you, I guess, to make a home with them. Now maybe you've settled in Panama, but one bit that gave me a chuckle was the way that the Alberta provincial government wants to promote or tout its low income taxes, which I think are about 43% at the top rate. This is not including property or sales or any other taxes.
GST.
Yeah, and so I just found that really hard to believe that a 43% tax could be considered low in anyone's vocabulary.
Yeah, well, when I left, my marginal rate was 52.
Well, the sad thing about it is that relative to the other Canadian provinces, that actually is low. That almost all the Canadian provinces have top marginal tax rates over 50%. So if you go to the maritime provinces, it's really tough.
Or BC, it's very expensive, very popular in British Columbia, but it takes a big buck to live there now. I lived there for a long time after the Navy, but
yeah, well, that's the problem because BC does have the better weather. That's why it's just so attractive for many people, including myself. So okay, but we've got to get onto this agricultural investing because I read 2 of the articles from your website. You've got 2 websites that I found. One is Agronosotros.com. Another one is internationalcoffeefarms.com. These are both in English. I just read a short history of coffee, and then the other one is about why. The headline is Uncorrelated Crops, Not Manipulated Stocks, which maybe this one is a good one to get started with. The note that stuck out to me was the way that you see agricultural investment as really just real estate investment, but your tenants are I guess in your case they're plants,
trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you could have animals. They could be your tenants too. And so, for people who maybe understand real estate better than agricultural investing, what are the parallels?
More likely, what are the differences? But a lot of the people that we hang out with in our quote unquote tribe, if you want to call it that, of professional real estate investors, people who own multiple doors in multiple locations in the U.S., Canada, and internationally, they all understand that cash flow is king, and the ability to buy, rehab, and leverage the net operating income in a property is going to get you a better cap rate and more money, and you can refi your way out of your initial equity and tax-free and have an infinite cash flow. That's all great. It depends on the territory and the location. It's very dependent on the factory down the road being still in business 10 years from now, and the local mayor not changing all the rules and all the municipality stuff, the employment rate and everything else, and then the people themselves. And you have tenants that are tenants, termites, and toilets is what they call it, are the problems. The phone never rings at 3 o'clock in the morning when it's good news if you're a multifamily apartment owner. So all those problems are eliminated when you have your tenants that are trees. They show up for work every day. They know exactly what to do. Nature takes its course no matter what. You can assist it and participate in the long-term cash flow from an agricultural crop that's in demand, or where the demand exceeds the supply. That's a key criteria in our strategy, our 30,000-foot strategy. The product has to be well known already. We're not in the business of trying to convince you to invest in the newest widget from Silicon Valley and then convincing you that that's going to work and all the rest of that stuff. This is just coffee, man. It's chocolate. I mean, everybody wakes up to a cup of coffee and loves a piece of chocolate with a glass of red wine at the end of the day. We're not going to change that very much. 400 million cups a day drunk in the U.S. alone, billions around the world. That's
hard for me to process, actually. I don't hate me for this. I'm not a coffee drinker. I do love dark chocolate, though. And
30% of our investors aren't coffee drinkers either.
Right.
That they know that coffee is a big deal. It is hard to manage 400 million cups a day, but everybody wakes up with a cup of Joe, and everybody let's go get together on a cup of coffee, and it's just ubiquitous. So we're not in the commercial coffee business, which is what most of that is. We're in the specialty coffee business, or what might be called third wave coffee, where coffee is processed on an individual basis on a farm. It's specialty coffee. It's hand managed. Each tree is managed by itself. It's not a bulk Colombian coffee farm. There's lots of differences in specialty coffee, but it's 26. The last stats I saw, it was 16% of the market, $90 billion market, growing at an annual rate of 20%. That's just the specialty coffee side. So you do your rule of 72s and look at the math, and we're doubling every couple, 3 years. So it's a rapidly growing segment of the coffee industry that is woefully undersupplied with a big demand that's growing rapidly. So that's a cool set of parameters to base the strategy on. And chocolate's not a lot different. The strategy there is to build up the business in Belize that Belize used to have, but through lack of training and management and capital, they've seemed to have lost their way when it comes to Belizean fine flavor cacao. So we are changing that.
Yeah, let me push you back on Belize, because I went to Belize a few months back and was not necessarily impressed with the place. It just seemed disorganized. I mean, and I went to San Pedro, which is the famous tourist haven, and I couldn't believe it. It was just, I'm not sure the word, but yeah, disorganized is one thing, and expensive. You don't actually grow the coffee on the what's that key? What's that key called right now?
Ambergris Key.
Ambergris Key.
No. The coffee is only in Panama. High altitude coffee only here in Boquete. But the cacao is grown in Belize, but it's grown in the southern part of Belize in a district called Toledo, which is virtually sea level and big. I mean, there's huge tracts of land available down there that are all perfectly suited soil-wise and climate-wise to grow cacao. But I totally agree with you. I mean, the country is is disorganized. It's difficult to break into. I consider it a barrier to entry that we have already hurdled to get past the central bank and get past the banking system and be part of the banking system, be approved by the central bank, have our corporations all in place, have all our people in place, all of that stuff that goes into creating an offshore business or a business anywhere. I mean, you can do it's difficult, and just try to get past the government in British Columbia. And you're going to spend a lot of time creating a new business there, especially if you're a foreigner from New Zealand or from Hong Kong or anywhere else. Or, I think the BC considers people from Saskatchewan as foreigners. So it's difficult. But it's also an advantage to me because it's a barrier to entry. I got quite a few $1 million invested there. We have all the situations in place. And if anybody wants to start climbing that wall, it's going to take some significant effort and some significant persistence to do that. So I totally agree with you. In San Pedro I have a word that I can't use in this medium, but it starts with S and ends with hole.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't like it. I hate it. It's expensive. It's filled with people that I don't really like, et cetera, et cetera. But I do have a chocolate shop there in the Mahogany Bay Resort, which is a 4-star branded Hilton resort just out of town. And we're the only and exclusive chocolate vendor in the townlet that serves this 2B 305-room 4-star hotel that charges $400 a night and up.
Yeah.
And the people wander into our chocolate shop and they can afford to pay $3 for a truffle.
Right. Well, this is a lot we could say about Belize too. One thing to know about it, which supports your argument that there is opportunity there, that it's actually it has the least dense population in Central America. Mm-hmm. So the country only has 400,000 people, and there's a lot of open land still to be utilized or taken up. So, yeah, there is promise there. I just was kind of taken aback because the problem with a lot of these tourist destinations is that you just see these wonderful pictures and it gives you false hopes.
Yeah, they show you the second largest barrier reef in the world, which is right off the coast of San Pedro, Ambergris Caye. They show you the blue hole, right, and those kind of things, but they don't show you downtown Belize City. And it's rough. It can be very rough. So we hang out in the south. It's a completely different environment. It's farming people. We have 204 farmers that are organically certified under our brand. So we hang out with them. We have 40. I just counted up payroll today. We have 30 people on the payroll in the farming business there. We have a full factory and kitchen built down there. And it's a little town of 5,000 people. And it's cool. And it's right on the water. It's just across the bay from you in Guatemala. So it's a much different environment down there. It's community, it's Garifuna, it's Mayan, homebred. It's like Saskatchewan, or Alberta. It's a homegrown people.
Right. And did you write this article? I'm guessing not. The uncorrelated crops, not manipulated stocks.
Well, fortunately now I don't have to write the articles. We have a whole bunch of people that do that kind of stuff, but I'm always the last one to approve it, and I end up wordsmithing a few things now. 4 years ago I would spend 3 or 4 hours writing that article and doing it all myself. Now I spend 3 or 4 minutes proofing it at the end and changing a little bit of the grammar or syntax, and then it's gone off. So we have very qualified people that could know the business, that have learned how to write.
There were just a lot of strong statements in here. And one thing to note, the article quotes the real estate guys who actually will be at the New Orleans conference. I should note that you're going to be in the New Orleans conference, so I'll get to meet you there in just a few weeks.
Yeah, we're going to be the platinum sponsor.
That's great. Yeah, so people, I've been pumping the conference. It is neworleansconference.com. Check it out. It's just a few weeks away, and I'm excited to be heading back to Louisiana. Now, you make the claim that real estate has made more people millionaires and billionaires than any other asset class. And Russell Gray, who has been on this podcast, he noted that there is, I guess maybe it's the media or just excitement, people get focused too much on flipping houses or on the sort of the pricing changes and not enough on the actual just slow and steady revenues from rental.
Yeah, long-term cash flow.
Exactly. And so now, in the end of the article, you mention the way, because you focus on specialty coffee and gourmet chocolate, and you make the claim that it is, quote, a free market completely uncorrelated with the stock market. Is that true? Completely uncorrelated? I mean, I didn't see a link backing that one up, but that's a very strong statement.
Yeah, it is. I believe it's true. Not in the commercial cacao or coffee business. It's not uncorrelated at all, because it's traded in the mercantile exchange, or the commercial market is traded daily in New York and elsewhere around the world, and you can see the numbers go across the ticker tape on the bottom of CNBC all day long.
Yes.
That's not the business we're in. We're in a completely demand and supply driven market that's based on the quality and availability of the product. In the specialty business only, not as I said, in the commercial coffee or commercial cacao business. 72% of the world's cacao is commercial cacao, comes from the Ivory Coast and Nigeria and Ghana.
Yes.
Is low quality but high volume coffee, just like coffee from Colombia or other places, Vietnam, that grow bazillion pounds of it.
Just don't tell any Colombians that.
I actually did a $6.4 million raise in Colombia building a specialty coffee farm in 2012. They're doing a very good job in the specialty business, but everybody in Colombia understands that they're a high volume commercial coffee, no shade, only sun-grown coffee. And there's a market for that, a huge one. But they're correlated with the stock market. The supply and demand-driven part of the specialty coffee and cacao business is not, in our opinion, correlated that way, and particularly not manipulated like owning a share in a corporation where you have zero input or zero control. At least in our opportunity, you own the land.
Yes, one of the interesting elements which we've touched on with a previous guest, I need to remember who he was, but was the way that smaller ownership or smaller portions are now available. And this is what you've focused on too, the way that in the past, few people had the capacity to go and buy farmland abroad, but that is getting much easier. So you sell a half-acre lots?
Correct.
So you've got 720 half-acre parcels. Give a sense to people, why that can be done now, and what might be the minimum starting investment to get involved with these kinds of projects?
We purposely created the business model so it would be available to the smaller individual investor. I've never been an institutional guy, all through the private equity part of my experience. I've always been an individual investor, small business investor, people that need $3 million, $5 million, maybe $10 million to finance their business would be of interest to me. So we've structured this on purpose to be available to the common man and woman investor that doesn't have a net worth of $1 million and makes $200,000 a year and is called an accredited investor. So these people have an opportunity to own directly a piece of real estate which has perceived security. Some people think it's secure and some people don't, but that's why there's various investment options for people around the world. We priced it really low. We started in Colombia when we built out that farm, and we sold 640 half-acre parcels there in about 16 months at $10,000 a piece.
Oh, wow. And, that's super low entry, yeah.
Yeah, it was very, very popular. And even at $18,000, which is what the property costs now in Panama for a half an acre. Panama, it's more expensive to buy land in Boquete because there's much less of it, and it's much more desirable because it's specialty coffee. The world comes to Boquete to buy the coffee. We don't have to go and sell it. So there's a lot of advantages and features, advantages, and benefits of doing business here that are different, but it's still only $18,000. To participate in a turnkey, socially sustainable, managed, offshore hard asset investment that you can dip your toe into, come and visit, kick the trees, as we call it, and see why toilets, tenants, and termites may not be the only way to go. But this would be an addition to diversification in your portfolio.
Well, the first thing that came up when I looked up Boquete was actually, what is it, TripAdvisor? Or one of these tourism websites, not the Wikipedia, because I guess people go there just to get it's a bit off the beaten track. It's a bit more of a peaceful place to go.
Correct.
So, yeah, we're hard against the half hour now, but which website, so the two websites I've been to look into work are Agronosotros, which is, in Spanish, Agronosotros.com, and internationalcoffeefarms.com. So if you want to learn more about David's work and organizations, go there. Is there anything, and of course, and you can see him at the conference coming up at the start of November. Is there any other place people should go to learn more about your work?
I really think Agronosotros.com is by far the best site, because you can go in there and there's a coffee section. You can learn everything you want to know on that site about coffee, and then link over to International Coffee Farms, where there's a lot more specific detail about coffee. And you can do exactly the same thing on Agronosotros.com for cacao. You learn everything you need to know about cacao. A lot of people don't even know that cacao is the base ingredient in chocolate, so they can learn that there. And it doesn't grow on, it does grow on trees. It doesn't grow under the ground like peanuts, et cetera, et cetera. You can find all that out on agronosotros.com. On the cacao side, it'll link you to the cacao website, which is BelizeCacaoConsortium.com, but they don't need to know that because that information is right there in a link. And in the center of the site, you can sign up for our informational campaigns. We have a drip campaign that comes out every couple of days and explains the details of what's involved in the investment. You can learn more about that. You can sign up for our email, our newsletters. You can go even farther and go through our investment suitability questionnaire and our non-disclosure agreement. Submit that to us. We'll give you a private members area password where you get to go inside where all the goodies are, the purchase agreements and ownership agreements and financial pro formas and all the rest of that stuff. So it's a pretty heavily loaded website as you decide on your own whether you want to go through this or not. You're never going to get a phone call from us. You sign up, you'll get your drip emails. If we never hear from you again, great. I mean, that's up to you. You're never going to get a call that says, "Hey, guy, I saw you on our website an hour ago. It's David. How you doing?" That's not going to ever happen.
Right. Well, David, thanks so much for your time. I've really enjoyed it and look forward to seeing you soon. Folks, if you want to get more information about this project and the others we cover on the show, go to goldnewsletter.com/podcast. Otherwise, thanks so much.
Just to help your New Orleans Investment Conference, come to our booth, which is the first one inside the door. You can't miss it. And we're going to have 5 Panamanian folkloric dancers coming with us. We're bringing them as
you're killing me.
Team. And they're going to be in their poleras and their campesino outfits, and they're going to perform 6 or 7 times in our booth. So it's going to be fun.
Oh wow, yeah, mate. Yeah, I'm eager to get on the plane. It's so soon. So yeah, folks, do come join us at the New Orleans conference, of course. And thanks again, David, for your time.
Okay, Fergus, thank you very much for yours. I appreciate it.
Cheers, buddy.
Bye.